All right, welcome into another episode of Coyotes Corner alongside Dave Vest. I'm Luke Lapinski. We are here the week of training camp. It's finally here, Dave. Finally. How you doing over there?
I'm doing really great.
Good.
We've been waiting a long time for this week to arrive. It's finally here, and, I'm speaking for myself, of course, but I can...
You always do.
...safely assume the Coyotes fans are just as excited as we are, if not more.
Well, hockey is all around us. You've got the World Cup going on nationally/internationally. Yeah, you have had rookie camp started over this past weekend for the Coyotes, and even last week for other teams around the NHL. So it's hockey season. It's coming up, and now training camp for the Coyotes opens up on Friday. You got rookie games coming up this week, which are one of my favorite parts of the preseason/training camp are the rookie games. I love it when they do those.
Yeah, it's great. And, of course, it's always against the Los Angeles Kings. And by always, I mean the last 5-6 years or so, the Coyotes have formed a great partnership with the Kings with respect to these games. 2 games every year, back-to-back, typically the same schedule. It's a Tuesday night and then a Wednesday afternoon. We should mention that those games, of course, are here this year. They alternate sites by year, and this year it's the Coyotes' time to host the rookie games. And the doors are open. Fans are welcome to come. Puck drops on Tuesday at 6 o'clock, and then it's a matinee on Wednesday at 2 p.m.
2 teams with pretty decent prospects camps as well. I mean, the Coyotes obviously have one of the top, 2 or 3 probably in the NHL, if not number 1, honestly. But the Kings, I mean, they've got a pretty good history of, even if they're not loaded in their farm system, of having a couple guys that are almost NHL ready that they can pull up. So this is a good chance to see them. It's also a good chance to just get a good look at all these Coyotes rookies that have been working out at camp or whatever, but you can only get so much out of rookie training camp. At a certain point, you have to show what you can do in a game situation. And look, we saw the rookie game where it was just basically the red and white teams against each other earlier this summer, but to go up against another team is a completely different animal.
And I can tell you from having witnessed these games every year, whether it's here or in L.A. or El Segundo, where they actually play these games are highly intense.
They should be.
I mean, I am not kidding. There are bodies flying all over the place. You've got, 20 guys on the Coyotes and 20 guys on the Kings who want to get noticed in any way that they can. The skill players are trying to get noticed for their skill. The tough guys are trying to get noticed for their toughness. And it's like worlds colliding.
What's the rule when you're trying to make a professional sports team? You want them to have to say your name, right? And so some of these guys in these games, yes, Dylan Strome, we've been saying his name for 2 years now, but there are other guys that are playing either for a shot at making training camp and then maybe making this team, or are just playing for a shot to get to the AHL or whatever. There's so many different levels of players in terms of what they're actually working for. And so, yeah, the ultimate goal is the NHL. But all these different players, you said 40 players will be out there on the ice. They're all working on individual, plans for this upcoming season, and so you put that all on the line in direct competition with other people you're fighting with for those spots.
And we should mention that if fans are unable to attend these games, that both games will be live streamed on ArizonaCoyotes.com. Again, the start times: Tuesday night's game is at 6 o'clock. Wednesday afternoon, 2 o'clock.
I strongly recommend, if you can only make it to one, the Wednesday afternoon game. You get out of the heat, you get to skip work, and you get to watch hockey. It's like 3 different vacations at once.
Something about a matinee, too, whether it's a movie or a late breakfast brunch type situation. Just something about being active in the middle of the day. It's just something I've always enjoyed.
Really? I've never seen you active in the middle of the day. But I understand you kind of aspire to be that person, right? So anyway, those games are coming up Tuesday and Wednesday of this week. And then, of course, training camp itself opens up on Friday morning.
Bright and early. The players will be taking the ice for the first time at 9:30. There's 60-plus players at training camp.
23 defensemen, which
right.
I think, that's just fitting that it would be number 23 with OEL here. But I think that just speaks to the plan to go out there and get a lot of depth on the blue line and see how it sorts out this offseason.
So 66 players broken up into 3 teams. And those teams will take the ice separately, of course. You'll have 20-some players on the ice in 90-minute increments. And if you're following all this, great. If not, don't worry. We'll have it all out on the website.
It sounds like the math riddle that Matt Damon solved in Good Will Hunting.
What I'm trying to say, and failing miserably, is that there'll be 3 teams practicing at different times.
Yes.
The first team will be on the ice at 9:30 on Friday morning. Again, fans are very much welcome to attend. All the practices will be here at Gila River Arena, and it's great, I think, to see fans in the building on that very first day. It's very exciting. They can come Saturday, you can come Friday and Saturday. There's no restrictions. Come on out, watch the Coyotes practice.
Yeah, there's always a good buzz that first day. I mean, you get it at rookie camp, certainly, but then when you get to that first day of training camp, it's like the first day of school, except there's a lot on the line. I guess there's something on the line at school too, but there's high expectations for this group this year. Certainly, internally there always is, but I think externally you're seeing this just around the hockey world. There's more and more people taking notice of the Coyotes because, again, anytime you talk about so and so as a top tier prospect, or this guy was a really high draft pick, or whoever, the majority of them seem to be on the Coyotes. And so, at a certain point, more and more people nationally and north of the border are looking at the Coyotes. And I had this conversation with somebody the other day, and it's tough, I guess, for you and I to answer this without sounding like homers or without sounding biased. But honestly, if somebody said you can go to rookie camp, any team, it's Arizona and Toronto. Those are the two. I mean, who else would there be? If you could only go to 1 or 2 camps, those are the two. And I don't think that's just people that live here in Arizona. I think people around the country, if they're hockey fans, those are the 2 rookie camps you want to see.
Should we tell people the best part about Friday?
We should.
Okay, if you cannot make it to practice, obviously people are working on a Friday morning and a Friday afternoon. If you can't make it and you want to still see what's going on, log on to ArizonaCoyotes.com right at 9:30, and as we did last year and I believe the year before, we will be live streaming that first team as it practices for the first time with audio commentary by Bob Heathouse. And somebody else. I can't remember.
You left out somebody fairly important on this.
Some generic sidekick. I can't remember his name.
Can I just pre-record all my words and you can just put them together based on what happens?
I like that very much.
Me and Heater will be there. We did that I remember doing it at least last year, and it was really fun. It's a great way, at least it was fun for us, to start off. We got good feedback from pretty much everybody except you too, Dave. So that was nice of everybody.
Well, I try to be honest.
You try to keep our egos in check.
I'll be there too, working behind the scenes, which is really how I like to go about my job, stealth-like.
Sort of like a broadcast ninja?
Yes.
Okay.
Love it.
So we'll be doing that, but we're not doing the full 8 hours or whatever. We're just doing the
first team session, 9:30 to 11 o'clock Friday morning.
Yeah. And again, try and come out if you can, but if you can't, tune in because that is fun, and it's just it's a good way to get a look at some of the familiar faces. Obviously, there's a lot that the Coyotes had going their way last year, a lot of positives that people have to be excited about, but there's also some new faces on this team that are also kind of familiar, like Radim Vrbata.
Let's dig in.
Let's do it.
Let's start with what we're going to see at training camp. As we said, there's 60-plus players. Not all of them will be there that first day or weekend. Some of them are at World Cup.
Yeah.
And they will be arriving as their team is eliminated. So it's hard to predict when fans will see OEL, Marty Hansel, and even head coach Dave Tippett.
Yes. Yeah, Jim Playfair will be playing a major role. Not like he already didn't, but he's going to be playing an extremely major role this year, at least at the start of camp.
Yes. So of those 60-plus players, throw out some names, Luke. Who are 2 or 3 or 4 players that you are really excited to see, whether they're guys that we know about and have seen with the Coyotes or newcomers?
Well, I'll set aside the rookies for a second because I think pretty clearly a lot of people are excited about whether it's going to be 1 spot that's filled by a rookie or 2 or maybe even 3, or there's going to be guys that get sent to Tucson and then get called up throughout the season. I think most people are pretty excited about some of these rookies. But in terms of other names, Vrbata is one of them because this is a guy that scored 31 goals 2 years ago, and last season didn't have that sort of production, but he was on a team that had no production. I mean, you could make a case by the end of last season that Vancouver was the worst team in the NHL. Now, that's not really my point, but you could make that case. My point is Vrbata now is in a much better situation, and when you start to look at camp and we start to get into the preseason games, I want to see who he's skating with. I think a lot of people just sort of assume, we'll put him back with Hansel. Those two played really well. For whatever reason, Vrbata being on the ice brings out a whole new level in Hansel, even if it's not them passing the puck together.
Well, they're countrymen.
They are. And then I think a lot of people are interested to see how Vrbata could potentially pair up with Max Domi, too, if that ends up being a line. And maybe that won't be a line, but I'm sure I'm sure Tippett or Playfair is going to at least try it at first.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit on the last podcast. That's really exciting to me, is to just see where Radim Verbata is going to be in this lineup. And, I think everybody is pulling for it, a Domi, Hansel, Verbata line, but nothing is guaranteed. That's what's so great about training camp and these preseason games. And just because Verbata had success with Hansel in the past doesn't necessarily mean that he will in the future, or that fits into the team that Dave Tippett is putting together here.
You can make a case, too, and obviously when Verbata and Hansel were playing together, one of those years they went to the Western Conference Finals, so they had a pretty good season. But you could make a case that...
It was 4 years ago.
Yeah. You could make a case that there's a lot of... that the team has more options up front now than they did even that year, really.
And they're different players now. Subtle differences, but they're different. Maybe they won't play together.
Well, and I think it's fairly safe to say that even that year they didn't have, there are comparisons between Ray Whitney and Max Domi just because they're playmakers, but they didn't have speed skill guys like Domi and Anthony Duclair and, even Jordan Martinook. We don't think of him as a skill guy, but he has those skills. He's kind of one of those ladder players that can play first, second, third, or fourth line, and wherever he plays sort of determines how much skill he needs to bring on that any given night.
Who else?
Well, Doan, obviously. I think that, yes, there's a guy named Shane Doan. He's only been the captain here forever, and he's only been on the team every season since they got here.
Did you see him down at Chase Field the other day?
I did.
I guess it was a while ago.
It was a little, about a week or so ago. He's a big baseball fan. Mike Smith was there too, and I always kind of forget how big of baseball fans those guys are. It's always interesting to me when you have a professional athlete that is at such a high level of their own sport, and then they're also a fan of another sport, and not just like a casual fan, like, hey, the Diamondbacks are in the World Series, so now I care. Like, those guys know every single player on that team. I mean, Shane Doan is a baseball fanatic.
He has a fantasy team.
He has a fantasy team, and if you get him talking about it, he's talking like minor leaguers in different systems. Like, he knows everything.
He's having a bad year. He doesn't want to talk too much about his team this year. But in the past, he's raved about his fantasy baseball. But anyway, Shane Doan obviously was down at the ballpark. Mike Smith as well. They took batting practice. Mike Smith hit a home run. I don't know if you saw it or heard about it. Just over the fence.
It's over the fence.
In left field. As he noted, the shortest part of the ballpark. But it went out. Everybody saw it, and it was pretty cool. Now, that's a huge digression from what we were talking about, but why Shane Doan? Why are you looking to see him at training camp?
Well, obviously,
we know what he can do.
We do,
but go ahead.
Well, I think there's a few elements. I mean, sports fans in the Valley, when you go to Arizona Cardinals training camp or even a preseason game, there's just such an outpouring from the fans anytime Larry Fitzgerald touches the ball. If you've been to a Cardinals camp, Larry Fitzgerald makes a routine catch and everybody goes crazy. And there's a certain element to that with Shane Doan, with hockey fans in the Valley. When Shane Doan, he scores, and even if it's just training camp, people start to go crazy. I mean, it really, I think for hockey fans in the Valley, it signifies the start of hockey season when you see Shane Doan out there on the ice. So that's obviously a big deal. It's just great to see him back out there. And honestly, the way the younger players, like the really new players, follow him around and kind of learn. I mean, it's to the point where you can see on the ice, like he sets the tempo for the whole team. But if it's Dylan Strome or whatever rookies are going to be there at training camp, they're going to follow him around and really sort of emulate what he does. And it was a great storyline last year. Shane Doan's talked about it, I don't even know how many times, where he was, oddly enough, a little nervous to see how the rookies would respond to him. And they responded to him better than I've ever seen any young players respond to a vet. I mean, they follow him around like he's their leader.
I'm eager to see a couple of the new guys. Alex Goligoski had a chance to go out to the ice den and watch Alex out there as they skated informally the past few weeks just to get ready for camp. And boy, he looks good out there. I know they're just skating around and not really in any type of structure or any type of intensity, but you can just kind of see by watching him in that mode that he can really move the puck and do things that this team needs a defenseman to do. So I'm eager to see him in a training camp setting. I'm eager to see Michael Stone. I'm not sure what we're going to see.
Yeah.
We might not even see him. I haven't checked in lately, but he was out there at the ice den as well the past few weeks. No contact or anything, just gingerly skating around.
It's just good to see him out there.
Absolutely. I'm eager to see Michael Stone where he is.
It's interesting, too. You hear this in other sports, like, oh, this guy's coming back from this injury, so he's out there on the field, but he's not really doing anything, no contact or whatever. He's just out there on the field. Michael Stone's on ice skates, so the fact that he's out there is a good sign that things are looking pretty good with everything that got hurt last year, because you don't just kind of float around on ice skates. Yes, you avoid the contact and everything, but it takes actual athleticism just to be on ice skates. So it's a great sign to see him back out there.
Back to the newcomers, Ryan White.
Yes.
A guy I know not a lot about.
He's kind of a wild card on this team.
Yes, great way to put it. Had a chance to meet him briefly at the ice tent. Very nice guy. He came up to us out of the blue.
He'll fit right in on this team of nice guys.
Yeah, right. But again, I'm eager to see how he plays. I think, as you mentioned, he's a wild card that can probably do a lot of the little things right. I don't know. I'm kind of getting a Tyson Nash type of vibe from watching the few highlights of him that I've seen, kind of all over the place and very energetic.
A lot of self-tanning or no? No, none of that? Okay. I mean, he kind of speaks to a bigger storyline to watch with the Coyotes just in general. They have a lot of these players that can play a couple different roles. And so as training camp evolves and we start to get into these preseason games, I am interested to see which guys fall into which roles. I mean, Jordan Martinook is the extreme, where he could play literally any line, and he played pretty much all of them last year, I believe. I think he even saw a little time on the first line. So I'm interested to see how this coaching staff determines, this guy probably fits better for us on the third line just for what we need, because this guy's playing on the second. And so guys like Ryan White and Jordan Martinook are certainly at the top of that list, because they can fill in holes anywhere in the lineup.
Okay. One other guy we should really talk about. I think we've done so.
Wait, before you get to him, I want to mention Goligoski too, because you already brought him up.
Okay.
He's I think he's right at the very top of the short list of players that fans will be looking at during camp, because he kind of signifies the new wave of defensive players coming through this team, and yet he's a vet. And when you start to look at this team a year, 2 years, 3 years down the line, you start to realize they don't really have a lot of guys even over the age of 30, and you do need a couple. And Alex Goligoski, I think, potentially plays obviously a huge role for this team this year, because he makes that defense instantly better than it was. And he's a defensive player in the mold of the 2016, 2017 NHL, where you have to be able to move the puck and trigger the offense. But down the line, I think he's going to be hopefully one of the leaders on this team too.
Did you say he was at the top of the short list?
Yes, and I saw you make a face, and I kind of thought about it, and that makes sense. I'm sticking with that. Short list, so there's like 4 or 5 names, but he's at the top of the short list.
If there's only one guy on the short list, is there still a top?
But there's not one guy on the short list, Dave, and that's the point.
Excellent.
I thought you had somebody else you wanted to talk about.
Nick Merkley.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think I've ever seen Nick play in a competitive environment with the Coyotes. I think I'm exaggerating for effect here. He obviously played in rookie camp last year, but he got hurt early on in the first exhibition game.
He's had a tough run, and he's almost the not amongst the Coyotes, but again, I always try and look at that national perspective. He's almost the forgotten prospect, and it's like, this guy was a first-round pick, too, and he drew rave reviews in junior hockey. And he's the sort of player that, he kind of gets lost in the shuffle of the Coyotes prospects. There's a lot of teams he'd be the top prospect in their system. So, yes, and look, Dylan Strome, obviously. I mean, we can sit here and tiptoe around it, but Dylan Strome has a very, very real opportunity to make this team, and I think the opening is there if he steps up and really just does what he did last year, and then takes a little bit more of a step. And he doesn't have anything left to prove in junior, so he's not the only rookie that can make this team, but he's at the top of the short list, Dave.
Nice circle back.
Thank you.
Dylan Strome, I spoke to him recently. He is highly motivated to make this team. He, like us, believes that there's nothing left for him to prove at junior hockey. He was asked in the offseason to get stronger and to work on skating. He did both of those things. I had a chance. He looks bigger. He looks more mature.
And that was the key. I mean, and there's nothing he could have done about that last year. He was 18 years old, but he needed to be a little bit bigger.
And I think you're going to see Dylan make a very strong case to be around on opening night against the Flyers October 15th.
He's somebody to watch in the rookie games too, because I've said this before, but when you start to get there's certain players you watch them in camp and they're running drills or whatever, and you're like, okay, well, that guy clearly is the fastest player, or that guy has the hardest shot, or whatever. That guy can do this, or that, like, Clayton Keller, when he was out here for the red and white rookie game back over the summer, there were certain elements of his game that stood out leading up to that. But Dylan Strome is a guy that stands out in an actual game situation, and so if you've only seen him run drills, you're like, okay, well, he's obviously very good. He does still stand out, but in a game, it's a completely different element. moment, and he is one of those players that's better in a game situation.
All right, so we kind of mentioned this casually, but I think it's worth repeating. To the fans that come out to training camp, starting Friday, of course, if you are here and you're looking on the ice and you don't see a couple of guys, it's not because there's been some major shakeup here. They're still at the World Cup tournament. Same thing for Dave Tippett. You're not going to see Dave Tippett until Team North America has completed its run, and the way that Team North America
that's a fun team.
Has played, who knows when that's going to be.
Yes.
So don't panic. OEL is still with the Coyotes. So is Martin Hansel, and so is Coach Tippett.
Well, yeah, obviously, I mean, we left OEL off this list of players we're excited to see at camp. He's
kind of
also
busy.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a given that we're excited to see Oliver Ekman-Larsson out there. And over the course of camp in the preseason, I'm interested to see how the defense shakes out, because I think the general assumption is that you're not going to see OEL and Alex Goligoski play together. So now you have two really impressive anchors of a blue line on two different defensive pairings. That sets you up really nicely. All of a sudden, your top four are covered pretty well. And as we said, the Coyotes have 23 players, 23 defensemen in camp, so they're not going to have a hard time filling out the 5, 6, 7 spot on this team.
They could field a whole roster of just defensemen.
They could. And what a team that would be.
Let's talk about the Coyotes website. Of course, that's part of my job here and something I enjoy working on very much. Just want to let everybody know that on Wednesday, September the 21st, a couple days from now, there's going to be a new look to the Coyotes website. So I just want to give everybody a heads up that they can expect something new for this.
It's just Dave's Instagram page now.
Upcoming
Is that pretty
season.
much what it is?
No, that's not that.
Okay, good.
That was suggested.
Yeah, by you.
Shot down. No,
everyone.
Every team in the league actually is going to be unveiling a new website this week, and the date for the Coyotes to do so is Wednesday.
Cool. That'll be something to look forward to, especially if you're going to live stream practice on Friday.
Yes.
Anything else, Dave?
Well, I'm not sure. The whiteboard has been inactive for this podcast.
Maintenance day?
It's a maintenance day for the whiteboard, so we're just kind of winging it here, as if the fans. Do you think they could tell?
Oh, I'm sure they could tell. Yeah, I think that's pretty clear. And we're going to edit back in me telling everybody at the beginning that Dave's just going to wing it for the next 20 minutes. There's just a lot to talk about now. There really is, and we made it through the whole summer. And there was a lot to talk about in summer compared to most teams' summers, and really just most summers in general. When you're talking about hockey, there was a lot to talk about this summer, but nothing beats the real thing, and we are now on the very edge of the real thing. I mean, it's starting up, so this is it. And I'm excited to be doing this show, Dave, with you.
How
do you feel about that? First compliment, and probably the last of the 2016-17 season.
Yes, no, that means a lot, Luke. I enjoy these podcasts as well. It's a lot of fun. I look forward to doing more throughout the season. Don't big time me once the season starts. Oh, I got to go hang out with Matt McConnell or Tyson Nash.
And what was your name again, just so we're clear?
Exactly.
All right, so for Dave Vest, for executive producer Doug Cannon, I'm Luke Lapinski. Thanks for listening to Coyotes Corner.